1. Ah yes, the changing of batteries, a pastime all are familiar with, from changing the batteries in our vehicles to our television remotes. Not a difficult task at all, unless of course, you're me. For context and in true TIFU fashion, this did not happen today, it happened 2 weeks ago. I had just bought a new-to-me Accord, and things were going swell. I no longer have an unreliable vehicle, I thought. I can go anywhere. Oh, how naive you are, younger me. See, as I was wrapping up the purchase, the previous owner told me all the car needed was a new battery for the keyless entry fob. And he was right. A week after buying the car, which has run like a champ and a half by the way, I get the required A23 batteries to put in the fob. Now, the fob didn't really need the batteries. I decided to get them anyway, and until the replacement came in, I had been unlocking and locking my car with minor difficulty. I once had to drive the car to work with the car alarm going off, which wasn't a big deal as I only worked a 2-minute drive from home. What? It's been hot and I didn't want to walk to work. I thought to myself, as soon as I get new batteries for it, I won't have to deal with this crap again. I was wrong. So wrong. Mistake number 1, I put the new battery in, and I decided to wait until later to test out if it works. As I was meeting a friend later in the evening, and didn't feel like going right that second. Mistake number 2, I leave home at 9 PM and I open my car, but my alarm won't disengage. Mistake number 3, I have the following thought. It's 9:25 and I'm just pissing off my neighbours with this alarm that won't shut off. I should just drive to a nearby business centre and figure things out there. Mistake number 4, I assumed the businesses were closed and that there was no one there to annoy. Mistake number 5, I start working on dismembering the alarm module using schematics I acquired online. I am underneath the steering wheel, all these wires hanging down from the steering column. Mistake number 6, turns out there are people in the business I'm in front of and they are not happy. Mistake number 7, I drive further down and away from these people. I don't want to annoy anyone else. I am a thoughtful freaking person. Just about to get the alarm disconnected when I hear them, sirens. 4 of them, actually. Step out of your vehicle, walk towards me with your hands extended at your sides. There I am, looking like I'm trying to fly while trying to sputter out my registration is in the car. Just let me go in and get... Stay right where you are. Guns are drawn because I decided to reach in as the guy was telling me to stay still. Oh, you think my stupidity ends there? Oh no, you are wrong, dead wrong. Let me tell you about how much more I managed to screw up. I'm put on the hood of my car and I'm searched, thoroughly. Do you have anything illegal on you? I hesitate as I don't know if the knife that's currently in my possession is illegal or not. Hint hint, it totally isn't, but you're supposed to tell an officer you have something that could be construed as a deadly weapon. Good job, younger me. I didn't know. I'd been a law-abiding citizen up until the people I just drove away from thought I was stealing my own car. Though the cop is pissed. Say something next time, they yell at me. Finally, they stop patting me down after making sure I had 2 testicles. Which I'm pretty sure I do, but hey, go ahead and count them. Pretty sure the only thing you'll find down there is vastly unimpressive. But alas, they sit me down on the curb, and I wait until the registration comes back clean. Which at this point, I'm not sure it will. I went to the DMV and have the temporary registration, but me being me started to freak out, thinking the temp registration wasn't enough. You know what cops love to see? When they see a would-be car robber start to freak out and fidget as they're seated. So now 2 other cops approach and stare me down. I have 3 cops staring at me now. Not how I thought this day would turn out. 10 seconds later, another officer appears and says, "Alright, registration matches his identification." They clear out in like 5 seconds and I'm left there with my mouth agape like an idiot. I disconnect the alarm module, now it only goes off for 30 seconds. But it at least stops while I'm driving now. Great. I meet my friend an hour and a half late. He laughs himself out of his seat as I'm telling him all that transpired. He buys me every drink and meal the entire night for making him laugh so much. I get the alarm professionally disconnected first thing the following morning. 2. Many events happened leading up to this screw-up that made it all worse. I had just moved out of my apartment and had another apartment lined up. That is exactly what I want. The problem was that I had a gap month in my housing situation. I talked to my girlfriend, and even though my lease ended right before university finals for the both of us, she agreed to house me for that month, knowing that we would both be preoccupied studying for finals. I had just moved all of my stuff into her place, and decided that I would move out her full bed and put that in my storage unit and replace her bed with my brand new king bed. I set up my PlayStation on her dresser, but realized she didn't have a TV in her room. So I asked if I could bring my TV in her room. I don't have a stand for it. I have hung many things on walls before, so this was just a normal thing for me. I take out my stud finder that my dad had given me. It's ancient and doesn't have a metal detector in it. Find my stud and drill a hole. It just so happens that instead of hitting a stud, I hit a copper pipe and hot water bursts out the wall and hits the neighboring wall 15 feet away. I immediately went to look under the kitchen sink, but as the apartment complex is so old, the water shut-off valve to the apartment is broken. I then went to look for the hot water heater, and that is in a locked pump house, as they have 4 large industrial-sized hot water heaters that run water to the entire complex rather than one per unit. I then proceeded outside to shut off the water for the building, and that valve is so rusted out that I couldn't move it even with a wrench. So the next logical step was to call an emergency plumber. After a $350 bill, it was 2 a.m., he shows up and puts a screw in it so that it's just misting and says he needs to be called tomorrow to fix it. This was the second night I was at her house. The water ruined my TV, my new king bed, my PS4, all of her carpet in her room and hallway, so during finals week, we are house hopping between friends, managing crews to fix her apartment, and dealing with insurance. The thing the water ruined most, though, was my dignity. 3. I was hiking with some friends in the Wicklow Mountains in Ireland. We hiked through the night, and at about 3 a.m., we decided to take a rest at a well-known spot called Raven's Rock. The place is known as a good spot for stargazing, and after spotting many satellites and shooting stars, we decided to have a little snooze. I put out the fire as my comrades quickly drift off. As we are on a small hill, I thought I would sleep on some flat ground nearby, so I set up there. It was a nice flat spot, but was rounded with spike gorse bush. But having hiked for so long, I deemed it fine. Then I encounter problem 1. I have not packed a sleeping bag stupidly, but ever the scout I decide on using a survival bag. A bag of rigid plastic that is used to either put stuff in, keep someone warm in the elements, or try to keep all of someone's body parts together if they have an accident. I'm about to climb in when I realize my wet muddy boots will cover me in bog material if I go in boots first. So I go in head first into the bag in one snake-like slither and almost instantly fall asleep. A few hours later I wake up. I am freezing and the sun is up. Condensation has built up inside the rigid orange bag, and I'm soaking. No problem, I think. I'll just slither back out. Problem 2 arises. I do sort of a sit-up, and the bag moves and instantly starts sliding down the incline at speed. The ordeal is terrifying. I slam off rocks, tree roots, and gorse bush for about 30 seconds, cursing loudly and yelling for help on the way down, until I come to a halt at the foot, about 20 meters down. My hands are now all cut up, but ever the scout, I go for my knife to cut myself out of this plastic womb prison. But the bag is so narrow that my arms are trapped, and I can't get to my belt with my knife on it. So I think hard and embrace my animal urges. I sink my teeth into the plastic and begin chomping and ripping away like a lion on its prey. After about 10 minutes, I burst out. I have escaped. The morning light fills my eyes. I am soaked, cut, bruised. I smell like shit, and my jaw hurts more than a redneck at a family reunion. But I had beaten that bag once and for all. I walked back up the embankment, only to see my friends still snoozing, unaware of the brave and valiant mortal combat I had succeeded in. I never did tell them. 4. A friend of mine was having her 21st birthday party at her house. She's Greek, so it was a huge family thing with about 100+ people there, and I didn't really know anyone but her. It was a pretty formal event, so I was rocking a cocktail suit type thing. Anyway, I'd never been to her house before, and it was out in the suburbs, so I'm running properly late. By the time I get there, the birthday girl is already giving her speech in front of a big crowd in her yard. The lights are dim, so I figure I can just sneak in around the back of the crowd and wait for the speeches to be over. So I see that there's a concrete driveway behind the crowd, underneath a carport. I head down some steps and I'm walking behind the crowd onto the driveway, when I suddenly drop like I've missed a step. But this time I'm knee-deep in water. My momentum keeps me going forward while my brain figures out that I've just stepped into a swimming pool. In what felt like slow motion, I plunged, suit and all, straight into the pool, and I'm underwater coming to terms with the situation I've just landed in. I thought about what is going to happen when I come to the surface, with a crowd of 100 strangers staring at me, so briefly contemplated exhaling and sinking to the bottom for eternity. Anyway, I resurface through a me-shaped hole in the pool, and my fears are realized when everyone is laughing hysterically at me. Turns out that the birthday girl had arranged for the pool to be covered in foam earlier. The foam had settled down, leaving a dry grey film over the whole pool that, in dim light, looked exactly like a concrete driveway. Meanwhile, there's no goddamn pool fencing. I ended up giving the birthday girl a soaking wet hug, and splooching around in my wet shoes. Word got around that I had been pushed in, so I went with that to save some face. 5. The plan. HAARP, High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, is a government project, and we wanted to see if we could do something similar with spare parts and a pickup truck, instead of a bloated military expenditure run by professionals. We were going to try for a bit of mad science, instead of the nice and polished kind $1 billion buys. Point of note, there are no mad scientists, just mad engineers. They don't have control groups and tend to care more about making awesome as fuck things happen than petty contrivances like FCC radiated power standards. The goal was to use some Tesla-inspired engineering and a junkyard of old electronics parts to make our own HAARP. Tesla's experiments are simple, and every electronic enthusiast knows them by heart. They need capacitors, coils, and a really big off switch. The capacitors. Capacitors usually come in micro or picofarad sizes. We needed a really big cap, so about a few million times bigger. America, go big or go home. We built some big honkers out of metal drums and coated the inside with paint. We checked continuity and had to redo it a few times before we actually got that right. In went the guts and make a capacitor, and we're done with that. We had to come back to this once the coils were done. At the end of the series, we filled up some 2 liters with our secret capacitor sauce. And we'd run some AC pulses through it into a multi-watt resistor block out of some industrial equipment. Math ensued, and we hit our tolerances. The coils. We had to wind the coils ourselves too. We needed what was basically a voltage ladder, which would be a series of transformers at like 50 to 1 each time. It's not a problem for the first few in the series, but when you start getting really high voltages, even the tiniest crack in your wiring, and everything's on fire. We had to use really thick wires because those come with really thick insulation that won't have any cracks in it. It got big and heavy, and this is how we went from pickup truck to flatbed. Go big or go home. The off switch. The most important part of any mad science is making sure you can shut it off. Many an evil overlord have died shortly after screaming, "But I'm invincible!" Off switch. Ours was made of some pneumatics pulled from a dead caterpillar. It pushes forward, the connectors meet, and we have juice. When we're done, we hand pump it the other way to release it. It's also safe because we're not near it, and it's all plastics, rubber, and non-conductive oils. Out of a fear of having the pump fail from our nearby barely controlled chaos, we opted for the hand pump. Slow, but it can't break. The juice. We were going to power this off the mains. No, not house mains. Overhead mains, the big ones. Don't ask how we hooked it up. Think junkyard, bored engineers. Imagine. Tesla's experiments needed a lot of juice, so does HARP. And there was no legitimate way to get that much power except right from the source, just like we did. How it should have worked. We'd get some spectacular arcing in our mystery sauce substitute. For the primary tap output, it would make the air ionize. That's what HARP tries to do, except a mile in the air. Normally, Tesla coils are put in open air to let the arcing have a little fun and put on a light show. We needed that in a confined space, so it was less the light show, and more what the light show did that we needed. Ionization. We put it inside a tall pipe and sprayed the inside with non-conductive paint many times. We should also get some pretty good heating effect. So air would draw in from the bottom, pushing the ionized air out through the top. I think it put out something like 800 million volts by the math. For comparison, most people are sane enough to stop at around 500,000 to 3 million. If it were left in the open air, the arcing distance would be over 20 meters long. There was no video of this because obviously hooking into the HV mains is frowned upon. Most people do it for less savory reasons than the wholesome pursuit of science. Also, we didn't think anything more sophisticated than a vacuum tube would survive anywhere near our monstrosity. The intense RF radiation causes light bulbs to glow, even just from the transmission tower, which is just due to the current flow and not a deliberate engineering choice. Cell phones near it would probably never work again. But that was going to be all we'd have to worry about. The circuit was balanced. We had an off switch that would not fail. It wouldn't draw any more juice than the factory that had run here before. Nobody would notice. Transportation. We thought it might be best to not be around when 500 people called in asking why the lights flickered and then everything wireless went apeshit. A normal car has normal electronics, which might not work after if this was loaded in back on the flatbed. Remember what I said about big drums and big coils? That's big heavy. So, diesel engine. God bless something that can survive a nuke. We also needed to be sure our vehicle was primitive enough to survive any mishaps and carry away the evidence with us. This was less a finely tuned chunk of RF engineering and more like a 100-ton coal-powered locomotive. But it had put on a pretty light show. We would throw a couple thick plastic tarps and sheets all over the back of the truck, which should protect it. Electricity takes the shortest path through the ground. With all the metal covered and the vehicle propped up on rubber tires, it wouldn't be a problem. Airplanes get hit by lightning all the time and nothing happens. Our ride was sure to live. The location. We carefully selected a location where we could set up and be near a transmission tower and a road. That took time, but we eventually found a parking lot behind a closed factory. A few cars were around, parked, but it was quiet, and that was perfect. Here's when TIFU enters the game. We waited until it was late enough nobody was going to see a couple dumb kids pull up in a big wheezing diesel with a tarp over something big in the back. A few minutes of setup, and we do our redacted on the tower. And we're ready to throw the dead man's switch. The hydraulic pistons edge slowly forward as we frob the foot lever. After a minute or so, a loud and deep buzz filled the air. The St. Elmo's fire was spectacular, Just as we expected, the heating effect caused the air to ionize and, in seconds, we had a nice glow coming out of it. And by glow I mean roar, like back of a fighter jet roar. It actually reminded me of some experiments you see in high-power physics or nuclear reactors. It was a sight to behold, ripping out of the back of a flatbed. It started to heat up. A few sparks flew out of the coils, but given the juice pouring through it, that was hardly a surprise. We weren't going to run it long. Well, everything went to hell pretty much as soon as we confirmed our little Frankenstein did something cool. The 2 liters, we did the circuit perfectly. We over-engineered everything else. Except those fucking bottles. We were tired and it had been a month of fuckery building it. We fudged. Just run it a few minutes, see what happens, and then pack it in, right? The bottles didn't last that long. And when they went a minute in, it was to a loud boom and spray. Inside the circuit, there's a resonant frequency that allows the best discharge of energy. Deviate much from that, and your whole circuit can become unstable. Rather than a smooth, cycling flow, you'll start to get harmonics and stuff. Ordinarily, this just means you don't get a pretty light show anymore, and your little junior Tesla coil science kit just makes an underwhelming buzzing noise and lets out the magic smoke. The feedback eventually just carks it. We did not have a Tesla coil science kit junior. For safe, clean fun. No, we had the Tesla coil science kit senior, and its motto was, let's fuck some shit up. With that much energy floating around, that meant wild excursions in voltage and current. Gratz were now ground zero of exactly what happened to Tesla right before he melted the Niagara Falls generators. The only difference is, this thing has an RF element. The smooth flow of ionized air started chiefing bad. It started shitting out lightning balls like an angry steam locomotive near a transmission tower, which it was connected to. We are not clever engineers anymore. We'd put it at least 5 times the distance of our expected arc distance between our apparatus and the tower, so there was no way for it to ground out on it. That would have been very bad. Ionized air is ionized. Ionized means it eats the paint off shit, literally. While we were trying to figure out if our new Chiefr Coil Deluxe TM was either an experimental success or a horrifying failure before shutting it off, Chiefr Coil decided to end the debate with huge fucking sparks in the everywheres. The drum wasn't insulated anymore, and our circuit wasn't stable anymore. This was now causing lightning on a cloudless night that would be seen for miles, along with orange and bluish shit floating around up there. It would have looked like an angry UFO saucer on a warpath to the people on the freeway miles away. We didn't know if there was enough left of the equipment to dampen any oscillations enough to keep the current from jumping to one of those ionized pockets that it was shitting out. Mainline current will crispy critter you instantly. With transformer isolation compromised, the secondary's output could feed back into the primary input. We were faced now with a daunting choice. Rush the hydraulics to release the connection, run and leave a very pissed off power company and 500,000 people behind, or begin praying at about 7 megaprayers per second. We made about 21 megaprayers while throwing paper, rock, scissors to see who'd rush the hydraulic disconnect. It was a harrowing run to the primer to retract the hydraulics. I stomped on that, like an Edragon bodyguard on that thing, pulling the oil into the reservoir and cark it before it carked me. All around, lightning was grounding out to everything metal, and the air was humming after our equipment dropped the base. Well, again, our circuit execution was flawless. Our materials design was less so. We retracted the hydraulics, but a spark gap had formed. The mains didn't want to let go. Now we had an apeshit Tesla coil feeding back on itself next to something that was now sending a continuous arc 10 feet straight up. It danced about in curling ribbons while pyrotechnics of blue and gold shot all around it. If one of those hit, The ionization path would send, potentially, 1 billion volts up to the tower and backfeed into the main grid. It'd be exactly like a lightning strike, only far, far worse. The noise of all this had everything around us vibrating, with a deafening and modulating hum. We thought we just needed to retract it a little more than the arc gap would be if the HV grounded out. Which is true, we didn't know it at the time, but this is how power companies turn them off. We were fucking terrified for about 10 seconds that it might not actually turn off. It did. Just like it does for the power company. And the acrid smell of ozone was the only trace we left behind, as we took our asthmatic and borrowed diesel, only the engine working and all the lights dead, and the smoking ruins of the equipment, back out into the country, before taking grinders to our equipment. Engineer 0, Mother Nature 1. Edit. Some technical details are incorrect or missing. This is not accidental. Moderators allowed this post on that condition. Edit. Please stop asking how to do this. It was a fuck-up, in the fine establishment of mad science, not a ringing endorsement to be suicidal. The plans were inscribed in the Electronomicon, and left in an electronics graveyard. Only the high priests in the field of electroengineering know of its location. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 5 True Embarrassing Stories, episode 42. Thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Now, before I go any further, I do have a shout out I'd like to give. It's a new narrator called Fun with Failure. They seem to focus mostly on TIFU stories, that's why I wanted to save it for this video. They sent me a message asking me to check out their channel, and I quite liked what they did. The content's good, if you like the funny stories you might enjoy their work, and they seem friendly enough, and they are just getting started out. So I wanted to draw your attention to them in case you may not have heard of them yet. Right, now I have a massive amount of work ahead of me, because I need to get that 30 stories special up by Monday. Done all my recording. I was sensible this time, paced it out over the course of a couple of weeks. I just need to edit all my audio down, and then I'll source images on Saturday, hopefully get it saved, and I'll just start uploading it as soon as it's done. And that'll be up for you guys on Monday at 6 o'clock my time, and whatever, that's UK time, so whatever your local time zone might be. Okay, and with that I'm going to head off for now, so until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.